Can you define the term transgender?
I think it's like the one with the mangina.
I have no idea.
Someone who has two parts.
Two parts?
Yes.
Okay.
Someone who's trapped in their own body.
I never really knew what that term meant.
Maybe it should be explained a little more what transgender is.
Although several individuals do not know what the term transgender is, there is still a considerable amount of people in the United States that identify with the term. For instance, 1.4 million adults identify as transgender, and 1.5% of students in the United States identified themselves as transgender. We are Team Frankfurt, and throughout this video, we will be discussing what is transgender. Then we will discuss transgender policies in employment, housing, and schools. Lastly, we will have a brief conclusion. What is transgender? Transgender is a term used to describe people whose gender identity differs from the sex marked on the birth certificate. Gender identity is a person's internal, personal sense of being a man or a woman or someone outside of that gender binary. In other words, the sex an individual was given at birth and their own internal gender identity do not match. Transgendered individuals endure a lot of discrimination. 26% lost jobs due to biases, 50% were harassed while employed, 20% were evicted or denied housing, and 78% of transgender students were harassed or assaulted. We will begin with discrimination against transgender individuals in the workplace. Federal. The Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 only protects an individual from discrimination in the workplace based on race, color, sex, religion, and national origin. It does not explicitly protect transgender individuals from such discrimination. However, courts, the U.S. Justice Department, and the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission have agreed that discrimination against an employee or job applicant who is transgender constitutes as sex discrimination. The Employment Non-Discrimination Act is legislation proposed that would ban employers from firing, refusing to hire, or discriminating against workers or job applicants based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. After being passed in the Senate with a vote of 64 to 32, it unfortunately died in the House. In Macy v. Holder, Mia Macy applied for a job at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. When Macy applied for a job, she presented as male. A short term after, Macy informed the employer that she was transitioning from male to female. The employer then informed Macy that another applicant had been hired. She filed a complaint with the EEOC alleging that she was not hired because of her gender identity. The EEOC agreed with Macy and concluded that Title VII bars discrimination not only on the basis of biological sex, but on gender identity as well. This was a significant case because it was the first time that the EEOC has held that transgender people are protected from discrimination under federal law. Now let's discuss state laws. Only the states colored in navy blue protect transgender individuals from workplace discrimination. We will focus on California employment laws for this segment. What employment laws pertain to the state of California?
California Employment and Housing Act of 1992, which prohibits sexual discrimination in public and private employment. In 2003, the act was rectified to include transgender people.
Transgendered policies in regards to housing laws will now be discussed.
Federal Fair Housing Act prohibits housing discrimination based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, and familial status. Contrary to popular belief, it does not specifically include sexual orientation and gender identity as prohibited bases.
State and local non-discrimination laws. Nearly every state prohibits sex discrimination in housing. Only a number of states currently explicitly prohibit both gender identity and sexual orientation discrimination in housing. In 2012, California passed the Gender Non-Discrimination Act, prohibiting discrimination against transgender and gender non-conforming people in housing and employment.
Last but not least, we will discuss transgender policies in regards to education.
School. Federal. According to the United States Department of Justice, under Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972, schools receiving federal money may not discriminate based on a student's sex, including a student's transgender status. The guidance makes clear that both federal agencies, justice and education, treat a student's gender identity as a student's sex for purposes of enforcing Title IX. State. California state law. In 2013, Governor Jerry Brown signed the first law of its kind in the nation, ensuring transgender youth in California can use bathrooms and participate on sports teams with the gender they identified with.
The case GG versus Gloucester County School Board involves Gavin Grimm, a 17-year-old boy in rural Virginia who is transgender. With the permission of the school principal, he used the boys' restroom for nearly 2 months without any problems. But after some parents complained, the school board passed a new policy prohibiting him from using the boys' restroom and forcing him to use the girls' room or a single-user restroom constructed especially for him. So he decided to sue for the right to use the bathroom in peace, and won. Unfortunately, his school board refuses to acknowledge Gavin's rights, so the Supreme Court will now decide. It is clear that transgender individuals do not have equal rights in the United States. Federal laws pertaining to employment, school, and housing do not explicitly protect transgender people. However, many states have adopted their own laws that explicitly do. It is time that the U.S. government amend these federal laws to include the protected class of transgender individuals.
It's time for things to change.
We all have to get involved.
We all have to give a damn. I give a damn. Do you?